Thurston put him on his back. Thurston, right foot kick, down the ground, into the in goal almost. Hodgson cuts it off. Hodgson taken by Norton. He took him late. Marshall skips away. Marshall's still going. Marshall's got Richards coming up outside. Now inside. Richards pursued. He pushes Johnson away.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tuesday, the 20th of February, 2024. You're back here for another episode of the Tiger Town podcast. Thanks for coming. I'm Zac. He's Toby at the other end. How are you this evening?
Yeah, good, mate. Good.
Good week.
Footy was back. How can you not be good?
It was, mate, pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
Bit to talk about, lot to talk about. Okay. But speaking of good, bestongrounddigital.com. Best marketing agency you can find, best digital marketing agency you can find, Best on Ground Digital. They look after the little guys. bestongrounddigital.com. Anything marketing related, digital or otherwise, bestongrounddigital.com. Shows sponsor, mate, 18-16, Warriors, Christchurch, Sunday. One sentence summary. What do you think? What were your thoughts? Make it quick.
Expected. So
yeah, that's one word, my friend. You're allowed to elaborate.
You sure?
Bit.
Because
yeah,
I think
you don't mention coaches of the Balmain Tigers or whatnot from 1941, we should be all right.
You know me, I like to go on my tangents. So you sure you want this to be one sentence? I can make one sentence without taking a breath.
There you go. You did your best. All right. So anyway, no, mate. What did you make of the game? You said expected.
Yeah, expected. I did expect us to be a little bit more dominant with our starting 17 and then to fall off a little bit when the juniors came in, and that's exactly what happened. So,
yep.
Yeah, what about yourself?
More positives than negatives for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And we'll open up on it, obviously, in a minute and start to piece our way through the weekend, but my thoughts can be pretty well summed up. I might elaborate in a little bit just by saying that I don't think, generally speaking, you can pull a lot of negatives out of a trial like that, your first trial. I think you can pull negatives out of a second trial when you're fielding your decent squad for a decent amount of time, which it looks like, we're going to be doing against the Dragons in Mudgee on the weekend. But I think the first trial is more looking for positives, looking for good signs, because nobody takes that game seriously, and I don't think either of the clubs did on the weekend themselves either in terms of the result. Just more systems process. So, yeah, I've got a few positives to talk about, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think I 100% agree. It's, it's become, I guess, part of the course. The first trial is kind of just giving everyone a bit of a feel for the game. You always give your youngins a bit of a try. You always throw your training trialists in there as well, just to sort of people potentially put their hand up and warrant selection. But yeah, I 100% agree with you in
that. So give me a couple of names then to kick us off. Who impressed you?
Straight away, Caesar. Straight away. Obviously during the game, you and I chatted and had a bit of a chat about what we thought, especially summing up the first half. And I said then it's somebody that I thought we had in Hastings, and no one else kind of agreed with me in terms of the coaching staff because they let him go. But it was a halfback who just talks and directs. He doesn't do anything flash, but he digs into the line. He creates the space where it's needed, but he's not, your Moseses or your Clearys or anyone that's a game changer, but he's someone that we've been crying out for a long, long, long time. So, yeah, that's definitely number one for me. And probably actually, who I think actually had his best game for us, and it's funny that it's a trial, is Ice. I think potentially, it was definitely a little bit more different in how they used him. I think they're using him more in how you think he needs to be used in terms of, hit him at the line, get him into those holes, really making sure he uses his, low center of gravity, his strength in the legs to push through. So I think he was definitely one of the standouts for me too.
Yeah, nice. There's a few others that we could have picked as well. And we'll talk about them shortly. I agree with you on Caesar, definitely. For those, well, I'd hope that you watch the game. If you haven't watched the game and you're listening to the pod, we appreciate it. But if you haven't watched the game, make sure you get the chance to at some point this week. But I'm assuming most of us watched the game, and obviously the game played out whereby predominantly most of our starters were on for about that 20, 25-minute mark, and then they did come off. That's what I sort of suspected last week was going to happen, just given that was the first trial. We did see probably a handful that they wanted to leave on and see through into the second half. I think Bud played early into the second half. I think Tupou played early into the second half, maybe one or two others, and then we had Polay and the likes come on, who are regularly in the 17. But for me, considering the time that was played, I said I agree with Caesar, and there's others I did like too, but Bud. So Bud was the person that I was watching pretty closely. And what I really liked about him is twofold. The first thing I always look for is defence. And in terms of a half that we're not familiar with. So watching him in our colours for the first time, there's two things I liked about his defence. One was his contact. So he was up and at them, and he was driving into tackles, and he was being a little fella, you sort of have to do that. If you catch, you'll get dragged and taken. And you can see Appy's a similar type player. Appy does a little bit of catching, but he also does a little bit of hitting, and there's nothing of Appy either. So I really liked the intent from Bud in defence, and I also was a big fan of the fact that he actually didn't overplay his hand. So he strikes me as the type of player who, not unlike a Benji, I'm not comparing them as players, but I'm saying not unlike a Benji, wouldn't have a problem with chancing their arm and maybe trying to impress early in their career. And I think Bud at St George has been guilty of that. I thought he did the exact opposite on the weekend. I thought he struck a really good balance between taking a decent attacking option. He threw a really beautiful short ball to Fatape for Caesar's try. He also put a beautiful little kick in really early in the game that Casey went through and forced a goal line dropout. So there's a couple of those little deft touches in his choices that were being made. He did run once or twice. He had a brief little opportunity for a half break at 1.2. So he didn't run constantly. He didn't try anything silly like chips and chases or anything too crazy. He seemed to stick to the game plan quite well. So, yeah, for me it was Bud, and it was for those couple of reasons. Yeah. But also, too, and I'll use that as a good segue, I really liked the way that they connected. We actually saw them play on both sides multiple times, with one of them actually leading to the try we mentioned before, where it was Caesar to Bud, short ball to Fatape on the in-line, and then obviously he ran through and flicked it back to Caesar, who was coming through in support. Beautiful little play, but they were very in sync. And not only in sync, and this leads me into a similar point I had as well, not only in sync with each other, the two halves, but in sync with the people around them, which was really pleasing to see. It was those two deft kicks. Caesar put another one in himself as well later, and it was the Jareen Buller one. And we saw it was a bounce of the ball to not result in a try as well. So I really like the way that they're connecting, and a lot of that, I dare say, comes back to what you were saying with Caesar in terms of communication and talking.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. The thing that I will sort of, I guess, elaborate a little bit more on with Bud is the fact that it looked like when Caesar went off, he moved a little bit more into the dominant half role, and I don't think he was as effective as being a 5/8. I think that having that pressure off him in the fact that Caesar's the cool head really opens him up. And I wouldn't say he's your typical 5/8 and just running the ball or really opening up. I think him and Caesar, like you said, both played both sides of the field, and it wasn't just Caesar being the first receiver. Bud was definitely the first receiver on a number of occasions as well. But I think that having Caesar on there definitely positively impacted Bud's game. And then when he went off, I felt like there was a bit more disjointed than it has been. But again, that probably comes down to the fact that in the preseason, Bud and Caesar have been training a lot together, so they have that sort of cohesion. Where when he came on, I think Heath Mason maybe played a little bit in the halves before he moved to fullback, and then Iverson Maddai came on, and obviously it was just more of a see where we're at kind of mentality. But yeah, I think that, like you said, the cohesion was a really good positive sign from both of them. Yeah. But I don't think Bud is in that position to scream for, put me in the halfback right now. I think that he could develop into that. Again, we're talking about one game. We're not talking about it's been the whole season and all this jazz. We're talking about one game, and he could, I could eat my words within 2 games and say he's just playing the house down and Caesar's playing like shit. But that's what I took from it. So,
yeah, it's important. I think you mentioned about the changes in personnel when Caesar and Appy and our front rowers and who else did we see replaced at that point? Casey had gone off, so the centre out that side had gone off. So Jaden Sullivan's centre had gone off as well. I think we'd have another replacement or two in there as well. I think the second rower's got a break at certain points. So not only, let me make my point first and then I'll sort of jump off the back of it. It's a given that trials are to be taken with a grain of salt. That's a pretty commonly held belief within the rugby league community. We get that. We saw what we did to Manly a couple of seasons ago and then what happened off the back of that. And the reason I really, really watched this game closely and the reason why was abundantly clear, which is the fact that not only do you bring on players who are not in your starting 17, but you bring on players who may not even be New South Wales Cup. And we saw that on the weekend. At one stage, we had 4 or 5 players that were eligible for SG ball playing out there. Navram Willett has played 2 games of SG ball. Correct, 3 perhaps. And I think at one stage we had something like 4 or 5 or even more. Maybe there was half a dozen players out there under the age of 20, 18 and 19-year-olds. They're kids, they're children. Not only is that the case, but it's actually, to your earlier point that I built off talking about cohesion, I don't think there's ever been a more clear example how important and fundamental, and I'm starting to notice this more and more in the way that teams play and how they connect. The second that you replace any player, unless it is an understudy that has done a shitload of drill work in that position with the players around them, any combination is going to make shit fall to bits. You look last year, in 20-odd games, we had, I think they said on commentary, it was 14 halves combination.
Something like that, 14
I
half.
don't care how good you are, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Australia never plays as well as what the strongest Queensland side did during that 8 years. Why? Because they knew each other so well. So when they would come into representative camp, their games fed off each other because they knew how to play in those systems because they'd done it for so many years in Origin. Whereas if you plug together a Blues team that hasn't had that continuity, doesn't have the Panthers connection, for example, you're going to see issues around that. Australian side sees the same problem. Australia very rarely these days blows teams off the park like they should on paper. The point I'm trying to make, and to make a short story long, back to talking about Bud, is the moment that Caesar, so the moment he's halfback, the moment his hooker, his front row, a couple of his second rowers, his centre, like the moment they're all gone, you're an island, you're on your own. So even if he gets pushed in for that period of time, and he did, and I saw a lot of comments around that, I'm cutting him almost 100% slack at that point. All I would want to see maybe is him step into that Caesar role and do a bit of kicking around and that sort of stuff. But the comments I saw that he didn't step up and take control, to me, kicking us around the field, kicking us on the 3rd and 4th tackle consistently and turning the Warriors around, which was the game plan that Benji Marshall had himself said, is him steering the team around. He didn't do anything extravagant at all. But you got to remember that, that all the players around him are not the first grade side. So they're probably that tier below, generally speaking. And he also hasn't played with them. He might not have played or trained with them, for that matter, particularly in the order that he had. He had Sione Vaihu at one point playing second row and then playing centre and not particularly playing well. When would Bud have ever even trained with Sione Vaihu as his centre or as his second rower? And that's just one player that was changed over in that course. So, again, that's the long-winded version of why I cut Bud a lot of slack around that. It's really, I know, it is funny. I'm having a chat.
No, it's just the fact that you've gone long-winded, and I'm like, look, very long-winded.
I'll wrap it up now. Very long-winded, extremely hurricane-winded. How's that?
There you go.
Or long hurricane. Basically just to say that this weekend's going to be, if that was the litmus test, this is proof of concept this week. So we need to see the same stuff out of Caesar and Bud, and we need to see it for longer periods of time with more of their likely 17 around them. I know there's still a few big names missing. and to see if it sticks. And if it sticks and there's no regression or a backward step or even a sideways step, we need to see it sort of go to that next little level in this next trial with intensity and everything up a bit higher. That will consolidate the way I feel about it. If it goes more the way that it went in that time that you were talking about, and he starts to drift into the background as the game goes on, despite the players he's familiar with around him, then I can obviously start to see that point. Again, like I said earlier, I'm going to focus on the positive side of it rather than the negative, because I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough sample size to focus on the negative. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong. I didn't say that Sullivan played bad.
No, not a criticism of you. I'm just saying there's been commentary about it, and I read it.
I felt like he isn't the mold of a halfback that you typically see. Not that, again, I said it's one game. Like you said, the sample size is way too small to really make an educated decision on that. But from the one game I saw, I just felt like he wasn't as vocal. He wasn't as comfortable. And that's like you said, he's on an island by himself. You know, he's with 19, 20-year-olds, you know, maybe has trained with a couple of them, but definitely not all of them. But yeah, that's just my takeaway from when you come look. But the one thing I did want to sort of talk about a little bit as well, and like you sort of mentioned him a bit in terms of, you know, the hooker coming off, is how well the team has finally adjusted to playing off Appy.
Yeah,
I think that was by far one of the biggest improvements I saw.
So when you say that, what do you mean specifically when you say?
The thing is, and you said this like last year, I was straight away, you know, not bad mouthing, but criticizing Appy, you know, not adding the impact you want, and then you kind of obviously flipped it and you said, well, it's really not Appy's fault. Our team is just not at his level, and they're not catching him when he takes a scoot. They're not at the line with him because he loves those short ball. You know, that pass to Seyfarth for him to score. You know, that's typical Appy. That's textbook Appy. And this game, what I saw was all of our fronties were hitting him at the line. If he was looking for a scoot, there was someone next to him at all times, whether it was Bud, whether it was Caesar, somebody was always next to him. It was like they are finally anticipating what he's going to do, or they're expecting something a little bit more than what they were last year. You know, the perfect example of who has stepped up and really focused on improving their game around Appy was Steph. Steph looked like he was hitting everything with a purpose. He was like, you know, if he was there, if there was a fronty that needed to take a hit up, he was always there, but he was always there when Appy needed him to be there.
I'll tell you why he looked good. I'll tell you why Steph looked good on the weekend. Because exactly what you're saying, Appy has got those forwards over a whole preseason, catching the ball over the advantage line. So Appy's doing what Appy does in getting out to the side, but then he was passing backwards last year. He would always pass 3 to 4 metres backwards. He never threw flat. Hardly ever.
Yeah.
But in that first 20 minutes, it was non-stop Clemmer, Steph, and Seyfarth up the middle, run after run after run. I don't think any of them fell beneath an 8 or 9 metre run in that whole time.
No.
The reason Steph looks so good, in my opinion, is they got their timing right for starters. So they were getting the ball at the exact right time at that advantage line and getting over it immediately as they receive the ball. But he also has that quick feet. So he's got that quick leg drive. So
he did that quite a few times, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. So if he gets the ball at the advantage line and he's, say, a half step or two quicker than Clem, which he is, and he's quite good at accelerating over that first 20 metres, he's going to get to the defensive line a metre earlier. He's then going to be able to, generally speaking, maybe get an extra post-contact metre or two. And I think he's the big winner out of having a full off-season with Appy finally. And I think Clem's going to do similar numbers to last year. I'm a big fan of what Clem brought last year. We both are. We spoke about that. Yeah. I think we're going to see Steph's numbers climb this year in running metres. Post-contact, possibly not, but particularly running metres, because I think he's going to get a lot more out of Appy and get to that defensive line far quicker and have them at him a lot slower.
Do you know what else? And I put this in our little chat as well. The one thing that kind of I guess, looked like to me. And, again, I don't know what's going through Steph's head. I have no idea. This is all, assumptions. But I think he was just like, to Madge, I'm going to show you that I deserve that Blues jersey and I'm going to play the house down. So I think he's got a lot of motivation. And not to say he never has. I mean, from everything you've read about Steph, and we've been a big, big, big fan of him since he came to the club. He had a couple of games where he took a little bit of backward steps, but that had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with injury. But we've been a big fan of him. His development's been great. So I think that he's got that, but I think he's got a little bit more motivation now. He knows he's good enough to play rep footy. We know he's good enough to play rep footy. And I think he's going to do everything he can to get that Blues jersey back. Again, that's all assumptions. That's me, Nostradaming that shit, essentially. Not really Nostradamus, but you get what I mean. But it definitely looked like he was running with a lot more purpose than he has previously. And again, not to say he hasn't never run with purpose, but it just seemed like there was something else egging him on.
For me, mate, the challenge for Steph has always been he has had really good bursts. And we saw last season, often his second stint, correct me if you disagree, but often his second stint would be his better stint in the game. But it was his, I don't want to say inability, but his lack of evidence of showing us that he is able to do that type of up-tempo style game on a consistent basis, whether it's both stints within a game or whether it's week after week after week. And I think that it's a lack of consistency, which is not unsurprising for a 22, 23-year-old prop in his first, his third or fourth year of first grade coming through. But I guess that's his next challenge. I mean, like we said earlier, this is all with a grain of salt because we're talking about primarily the top 17, and primarily they only played around about 20 to 25 minutes, most of them, and Steph's in that category. So we need to see it again in the trial this week, and we need to see it become a mainstay for the first few months of the season. A lot of people, all the talking heads, have got big raps on Stefano, but the gripe that he has is that he goes to sleep. Whether he gets complacent, whether he gets lazy, or whether he was running out of puff in the past, we don't know. But that entire stint was up-tempo. I haven't actually looked at his stats. I'd love to know what his running meters were. But I wouldn't be
talking and I'll have a look.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if, they were well and truly up over that 100, or at least relatively close in what was a short stint. I also liked his effort on effort. He made a lot of efforts to get off the line early in sets. He made a lot of marker across 2-3 in a row type of efforts, which for a big man is obviously very hard to do. And probably knowing he wasn't coming back in that second stint, maybe he left it all out there, which is good. So that will be interesting to see if he does get a couple of stints against the Dragons in Mudgee, to see if he keeps a little bit in reserve for the second half. But very, very impressive.
Well, here you go. So you said the biggest, probably, Steph was the biggest, I guess, he benefited the most from Appy's and finally training with Appy in a full off season. For those that are on YouTube, I don't know where Zach's gone, so I'll just keep talking. But him, Clemmer, and Seyfarth are the big ones who obviously have played a lot of that direct running. Steph played for 20 minutes, made 87 meters. Clemmer had 17 minutes, ran for 79 meters. And Seyfarth played 30 minutes, ran for 73 meters. Do you know who actually made the most meters for us?
Sione Fainu made about 160 odd with an intercept.
Oh, potentially? 149. Yeah, 149 running meters, but he had that break too. So yeah. That would have taken. That was 40 meters.
So if you think about those stats from our middles, that was for a single stint essentially. If Seyfarth's in that position, what's he playing, 80 at lock possibly? If he is first choice, at the very least, he'd be playing at least 50 to 60 if somebody comes in as a rotation, whether Pole plays in the middle briefly quality plays in the middle briefly to give Seyfarth the rest. Either way, those three starting middles put out those numbers of, what did you say, 90, 80 and 75 or something?
87,
so if they're getting double the game,
73.
if they're getting double the game time and it's that sort of output, you're talking 150, 160 each for our middles. And that, again, to bring it back to Appy, I think that flat style of play over the advantage line that he was trying to get going last year has reaped benefits in the off-season, and it's back to that cohesion and combination that we were talking about before.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. So, it's not... I think that we... And from everything you saw in that, and we said it last year as well, we believed that our forward pack was probably one of the better ones in the comp, if not in the top 5, and I think we're probably going to back that up this year. Making yardage was never our issue. We were down in the opponent's 20 so many times, it was getting over the try line, which we just could never figure out how to do. So, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this unfolds in the year. I think that, all these talks about offloading Clem or anything like that were just talks. I don't think Benji Marshall had any want to do that. But, I think we've got a fantastic forward pack already. And I think I think for me, if we think about underwhelming, I think Pole was a little bit underwhelming for my liking. I don't think he would usurp any of the other ones like you predicted, or like you wanted, like him starting as a prop. I think he will come off the bench still. But yeah, I think our starting props are just exactly what we need them to be.
Yep. And like we've said multiple times, disclaimer, long may it continue. It was 25 minutes in almost a muck around game. So let's all take big breaths, but you're going to analyse it as best you can. I'm anticipating they went out there in the first 25 to half an hour with a game plan to execute with most of their starters and keep it very, very simple, which we saw that. There wasn't a whole lot of enterprising play. We didn't see a lot of expansive football. We saw kick early. They kicked on the third at one point. A couple of 40-20 attempts, again, early in the tackle count. And so we're satisfied, I think, with that. And we're going to hopefully see similar signs next week. But hopefully now they've got a little proof of concept in terms of their ability to execute on a baseline plan. Let's play a little bit around with the ball, particularly considering our likely starting backline is probably playing on the weekend. So, mate, I think we might jump to... We're not going to run through all 28 players, folks, because we'll be here forever, and a lot of them didn't see a whole lot of time. We might rip through really quickly, but I just want to go through the list very quickly, and there's a few players that we won't have a whole lot of chat about, I think, given game time or given how much they frequented in the game or played a role in the game. Jarian Buller, what did you make of his short performance, because it was similar time frame?
Yeah, I think he played a little bit more. I think he did start the second half, but he went off pretty quickly. I think he was the Jarian we know. I'd still like to see him a little bit more in terms of sniffing around the ball a little bit more, especially in those sweep plays as well. So, but, Jarian is still the one thing people need to remember, and they'll probably, through the year, they'll expect diamonds every week from this kid. It's his second year at first grade. So, it was just exactly what I expected from him. And that's pleasing in itself. But I still would like to see a little bit more. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think he looked a little bit more threatening in attack. I think we got a brief taste of a few trick plays and a few ways that he's going to be injected. I think he looked a lot freer in attack. He was floating a lot more. I think I saw him barking and pointing a little bit at one point, so his communication seems to be up. And then in defence, we saw him, contribute to a try saver or two again, which is just so Jarian Buller. The thing I really like, and it's hard to pick because, one, he's very new and we're all very enamoured with him. We're in a big honeymoon phase with Jarian. But one thing I really like about Buller is he is always where he needs to be. His execution defensively and positionally as a fullback is phenomenal, especially considering how inexperienced a player he is. Now, touch wood, he's probably going to get caught out of position against the Dragons on the weekend. But everything I see, and again, he did it again in his short stint on the weekend. He was just in the right spot at the right time, and that's what I really like about him. Safe as houses. That's what I love about Jerome Buller is you can bank almost on the fact that, one, he will at least hold up someone on a break or he'll put a stop to it predominantly. There's times that we've had fullbacks in the past where as soon as somebody got through the line, you thought, oh, no, it's a set ball. And under high balls, under kicks, chasing grubbers, all that sort of stuff. He's the type of bloke you want because, not unlike a Stephen Crichton, the ball tends to fall to him, I reckon. And so, yeah, we saw a little bit of that on the weekend. Staines on the wing, mate. We didn't see a lot of Staines.
No, he didn't come in much for a few runs. He definitely, was. I think he was on RTS's side and did what he needed to do and not come into RTS so that he creates that overlap. So he was very solid in defense, especially in terms of communicating with his centre. I think Fatape was marking RTS. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it was Casey.
Oh, it was Declan, was it? Yeah, we won't talk about that.
RTS was on the left and Fatape was on our left too.
Okay.
Yeah. Casey and then Vaihu, because he swatted Vaihu away a couple of times when he came on for Casey.
Yeah, thanks to what the mole said is, it's not even that bad of a hit. Yeah, cool. All right, I digress. But yeah, it was, again, he was another one that was a little bit underwhelming in terms of his input. But another thing too, he came back. He hasn't really played much footy in 12 months. He played 8 games for us before he perforated his bowel. Then he came back for 2 games and did his hamstring. So, he hasn't played much. So I think he's probably just getting a feel for the game again. And hamstrings are a little bit more of a touchy one. You definitely want to make sure that you can get into full stride prior to, I guess, any contact. So you know better than anyone.
Yeah, the ball, I know better than anyone.
Haven't you done your hamstring a couple of times?
Not hemi, no, mate. But I have rehabbed many a hamstring.
It was your quad, wasn't it?
Yeah, I pulled my quad
kicking a ball
conversions before the game. That was good. I still played a whole half with a torn quad in the centres.
Yeah, because centres don't do anything.
I was very lame that day. Still made more tackles than you in the middle. Anyway, I just don't. I think it was one of those games with Staines where the ball just didn't come his way. They tended to be kicking to Tupou, as I would too, given that his hands clearly still seem to be a problem. And in attack, we were playing a very, very direct up the centre football match or football plan. And so he just didn't see a whole lot of ball. I think at one stage, Bud threw a big loopy Harbour Bridge pass, but it was a little bit off. And so that was sort of the most action he saw. And I think he had 1 or 2 little carries out in which he got kind of monstered by a big, aggressive, trying to impress Warriors pack. So yeah, it's a game you can't really read much into, in my opinion. I think if we play a bit more football this weekend, we might see a little bit more of him where he is at his best. And, I think, is it unlimited interchange this week?
Yeah.
It's for both.
The whole preseason challenge is unlimited interchange.
That's a shame. It'd be good to see one trial match played in regular NRL conditions just to see how fatigue can play a role in the game. But I guess I do understand why they do what they do. Anyway, yeah, so we'll see how it goes this weekend, mate. Number 3, Solomon Fatape.
I was very impressed. Very impressed with him. I think that the one thing that we talked about with him was we know that in attack he's very strong, runs great lines, really powerful upper body. Defense was something that was concerning for us. I thought he did quite well in defense. I thought he read, I guess, the sweep plays really, really well. There was that one try, I think, came off that inside ball. And yeah, I'll just keep talking to people. It's again, people on YouTube. Came off that inside ball, and you can see that it was Steph's fault, but he read the outside backs really, really well on that. He was manned up. It was perfect. I thought he was great. I said in the chat, I thought he'd be a smoky potentially for round 1, but I don't even think he's been named in the extended squad this time. So,
no. which is interesting.
Yeah.
I thought he had a good game. It's very easy to notice the break he made off Bud's short ball and the little flick to Caesar. That was class, and it's not unlike what we've already seen from his highlights package in Q Cup. But I agree with you. I think I was expecting him to make a couple of bad decisions, which is probably unfair, to be honest, and or expecting maybe some signs of defence insufficiencies. But he and Junior on that side defended really, really well together.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether or not they didn't throw as much that way, I think a lot of the expansion came via, obviously, RTS. They were giving him a lot of early ball. So there was a bit of work to do out on that side. But, yeah, mate, I thought he was great. He was very, very solid. His first-up contact was great. Where I wanted to see a bit more out of him, Staines actually I mentioned as well, was coming out of territory. So when we're deep in our end, early in sets, trying to get our sets started, I expected a little bit more. But again, I go back to the fact that we played a Warriors side, traditionally a pretty big side, unlimited interchange, young players trying to have a crack as best they can. So I think if ever you're going to see a team swarming on players down in their own end trying to get out, that's pretty up against it, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was the reason why we didn't see a whole lot in terms of his ability there. But I thought he was very willing. He's strong into contact. So, no, he did a really good job, and I hope that he continues. He's obviously going to, start the season, we're assuming, in New South Wales Cup. So I'm hoping that he continues to develop and play the house down, because I think it would be pretty hard for us for the coaches to be disappointed with that performance.
No, 100%. The thing is, to veer off a little bit, obviously you and I were talking quite heavily during the game that all the commentators were talking about RTS. They weren't really focusing on us, the return of RTS. The one thing I will say is he doesn't look like he's lost a step. And step I use, as a pun as well, because he's still lethal, isn't he? That the amount of times he came up the line and had that RTS step and looked like he was potential to make a line break every single time. He's going to be the same RTS we all remember. So
he's a good addition, no doubt. It's pretty remarkable the Warriors finished top 4 and they managed to add RTS to that side or to that back line. I'm probably in the minority when I'm not going to say I was underwhelmed. I guess I just expected him to do really well, and he did.
Okay, so he performed the way you expected him to perform.
I think so. Yeah. Let's not forget as well, he played on a side. He played on a side that his starting opposing centre was Declan Casey, fringe NRL player at best. With full respect, Declan, I hope you play a lot of NRL when you feel better. He then had a stand-in Vaihu on that side. He had Jaden Sullivan, who's only played 30-odd NRL games, so he's still a young, inexperienced half. He then had kids on because RTS played a lot of minutes. He played 60 or 70 minutes. He didn't make... Now, I'm not a fool. I thought he played really well, but he did not make a line break. He did not have a try assist or any of that sort of stuff, considering that was the case. So in that regard, he didn't blow my socks off, if I'm being honest. What I did see is a brick wall. I saw that the Warriors' edges are going to be, in my opinion, really hard to break down because he's now been added to that. I was really impressed with RTS more so defensively than anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know how you don't get around him. I don't think you go through him because he's big. He even whacked Fainu. It was from the blind. It was a blind shot.
Blind side, and Fainu was looking for a pass, so he'd stop.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, but he can hit, and he's a big bloke. So I agree. I think he played really well, but I wasn't as blown away attack as what everybody made out. Just for those reasons, I guess I laid out, and I understand that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't care. I'm not worried. Fuck worries.
Yeah, let's go back to talking about the Tigers. Who the fuck diverted this conversation to the Warriors?
I will say, considering we're on tangents, I wanted to mention the commentary on the weekend. Now, if anybody watched that game live with the Corey Parker show and whoever else was on that commentary on Fox Sports, dead set, throw something in the comments, send us a message, something on Facebook, something on YouTube, whatever it might be. That commentary was that bad. It's just going out of fashion. The Warriors, okay, so all game, what did we get? Experienced Tigers side against young Warriors, New South Wales Cup wannabes, this sort of stuff. oh, we can't believe how many players are out for the Warriors. The Tigers have got the most experienced side. Here's some names that played in the Warriors side, and they did not throw all their youngsters on at the same time, mind you. They had RTS, Marcelo Montoya, Chanel Harris-Tavita, who's a starting NRL half, Luke Metcalf, starting NRL half, Bunty Afoa, Freddie Lussick, Tom Ale, Jackson Ford. Okay, so that was at least half their starting 17 in what I just named on the weekend was in that side. And the commentary around it, mate, it did my head left, right,
The
and
thing
centre.
that annoyed me.
At one stage, we had Talon De Silva, Josh Folletti, Heath Mason, Tony Sukar. Who else do we have on there? Iverson Matai, sorry. A bunch of kids who are brilliant and we're so excited about, but no mention of that stuff. Okay, it was just and then it was RTS Cam. Do you remember when they did the old Hayne playing cam?
Yeah.
That's what it was like trying to watch it on the weekend. Oh, RTS, how good is it to have him back in the game? Yeah, it's all right. I'm a Tigers fan. I don't really care. Anyway, carry on with the game. Oh, RTS, he's pointing, he's barking. Look, they just look so organised. Shut up. Who cares? Anyway,
the one thing that really
I've been wanting to get that off my chest for about 4 or 5 days.
Well, the one thing that really annoyed me. The one thing that really annoyed me was when they kept referring to, oh, how brave this team is by only, having 12 players on the field. Like, having a player off when there's unlimited interchange does fuck all.
Yeah,
you can create an overlap. Yeah, but they'll rush you. It's hard to create an overlap when they're not fatigued. So that just annoyed me.
It was also the case that we did have 12. We did have an extra player for the better part of the game. We also played a whole bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids that are playing out of position in different roles with New South Wales Cup players for almost the entire second half and a decent chunk of the first half as well. So there was no cohesion or anything. So if you want to seek to take advantage of a professional rugby league side with a one-man advantage, you've got to be pretty good at what you do. You've got to strip players properly. How on earth are you going to do that when you've got someone who played SG ball next year, a bloke who's on a training trial that came from the Manly system, New South Wales Cup behind you? You're only in your second or third game yourself. So there's context around everything. I get it. I understand it. If this was an NRL game, you'd be annoyed, but it wasn't.
Like when we lost against the Knights last year. Yes, I was very annoyed.
Exactly. That's a legitimate gripe. I don't think, and this is my opinion, everybody has their own opinion, I don't think we need to place a whole lot of credence in that regard. And that's what I was saying at the opening to the show is that, look, we can focus on that, but I think there's a lot of context around those types of things when it comes to negatives. Yeah. I think the positives can't be explained away with context. Oh, this person played really well only because. Maybe. Maybe if Bud Sullivan tore up the New South Wales Cup Warriors side in the last 10 minutes, you could say that. But anyway, that's the mega digression of all digressions.
Oh, that's the typical Tiger Town podcast. That was a tangent and a half.
Poor old Declan Casey, mate, got hit shoulder first, incredible force, sent off the young Kiwi bloke that did it, which was unfortunate for both parties. It was a bad one, man. It was a bad one. When he came down, his head fully whiplashed into the turf.
As soon as it was hit, he completely went, bloody zombie-like. He literally dropped the ball, arms went out, eyes went in the back of his head. He was done. He was out.
It's a bit of a loaded question, but was it the right call?
Yeah, 100%. Anyone else that disagrees with that shouldn't be a journalist. Tony Adams. But, you literally watch it, and they're like, I could forgive that it, for me, there was a little bit more than just, I don't think it was accidental in terms of, I don't think he wanted to knock him out, but I think he definitely wanted to put a shot on, and I think he didn't care where his shoulder was going to go. I think it was very, very reckless. Because if Declan Casey had been falling, you could sort of forgive it. Declan Casey was still upright, and I think his name was Mau, was the one that potentially hit him. Didn't look to bend in any way. Didn't look to get his hips down to try to drop his shoulder a little bit further down. he had his shoulder up. He's like, I'm going to hit you, and I'm going to hit you wherever I can. And yeah, it was a bad one, and I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. I think he potentially has been charged for 5 weeks. I think I read somewhere.
I think it was. I can't remember the actual charge. I'm assuming it's a grade 2 or 3, obviously. But he's pled not guilty. So, being a Tuesday, judiciary's tonight, I think. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't know what he's thinking because, as you said, you could watch the stills, you could watch the live shot. He makes clear contact with his shoulder in Declan Casey's face, who was upright, and Vau was almost on his toes because he was rising into it. He just hit him completely flush. And I don't know what he's hoping for.
No. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think there was any, like I said, there was no intention for him to actually hurt him the way he did. There was no malice involved, but he definitely wanted to hit him. That was definitely very, very clear.
Yeah, and he's trying to rattle him and he got it wrong.
Yeah, he's young. So, he's not even, I think he's 20. There's lots of talk about this kid, especially over the ocean, over the pond. But he's young, so he's got a lot of learning to do about how to, I guess, tackle properly and control that aggression.
Yeah.
So
anyway, get well soon, Declan. Hopefully we'll see a bit of you either in cup or first at some point pretty soon, because love the energy you brought, as we were talking about last week. Yeah, I thought
he was good when he was on.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the energy. Like I said last week, he's a goer, so a lot of effort there in the limited minutes that he had. Junior Tupou, mate.
Mixed bag for me. I think he started off quite poor, made some poor decisions in attack. His ball control was a bit poor, but I think he slowly warmed into the game. Made a couple of really good, post-contact meters coming out of his own end. So, mixed bag for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. He's a handful. If it wasn't for his carries out of yardage, I don't know that he's got himself a spot. So, he, as you said, he made a good couple of runs to make us some valuable meters at certain points later in the game. So, I still think he's probably first choice with Stones at the moment, but as we'll get to later, Lob played pretty well and obviously had a nice little highlight for himself, and there might be the likes of him or somebody else maybe putting a bit of pressure on him. We spoke already about Bud and Aiden, so we might skip over them. Same with Stefano. Just quickly, Appy, I think that, as we mentioned before, I think Appy's biggest asset on the weekend was that he had people going with him, and I think that he has managed to get the players around him in his middle playing with him. And it looked like he was a bit of a burdenless player, whereas last year it looked like he was very burdened by the responsibility and the playmaking duties.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's what I said to you in the chat. I think that having people understand the way that he plays and the way that it should be played had freed him up quite a bit. He had maybe one or two scoots out of dummy half, but that wasn't his game plan. His game plan wasn't to try to create something with every play. He, like you said, it looked like there was just a weight lifted off his shoulders and he could just play his natural game. And he looked happy as well. Appy looked happy.
Nice to see. I think it's going to pay dividends for a second tier reason. And I actually think we saw it on the weekend. So you remember where he threw a dummy and ducked under and got through?
Yeah.
I put that down to the fact that Bud was on the outside and getting a lot of shovel service immediately. And I think whoever he's gone past had one eye out wide to shift off and push out and lost a bit of concentration. So I think with Caesar and Bud, if they continue to play that conducting style of football that we saw a little bit briefly on the weekend, people might forget briefly about Appy, whereas they could load up on Appy heavily in the back end of last year because they knew, particularly when Brooks was out, there was no threats there. Who do we have? Will Smith and Wakeham. You could give them time. And so there was no real threat there, whereas I think that the likes of Caesar and Jaden, Bud, who, if not are running expansive football yet, I think look very organised and look like they will run shapes and run plays and run swings. I think that will open Appy up to do a little bit more crafty stuff with the eyes, maybe looking past him a little bit more than they did last year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that, this is something that we've obviously been crying out for a few years, more so last year because that was our first year with Appy, but having those halves that kind of take away from the middle needing to do everything or one player needing to do everything. We've had it numerous times in the past. Benji, Tedesco, Brooks at one point. It's nice to have a little bit more of an option, both sides and in the middle. So,
No, definitely, and hopefully we see a lot more of that on the weekend, and maybe see it start to grow and evolve a little bit off that very simplistic plan we saw on the weekend.
Yeah,
we spoke about the advantages that Clem saw as well, so we'll jump ahead to Papali'i. You mentioned before you're a big fan of his game, saying that 25 minutes was probably his best stint in a Tigers jersey.
I 100% believe that. I can't remember him having much more of an impact than he did in just those 25 minutes because, again, whether it's an attitude change, whether it's we've finally learned how to use him properly, whether it's X, Y, Z, again, like you said, there's probably a myriad of factors as to why things are happening on the field. And that is, couldn't be more truthful or not further from the truth. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but he just looked like he wanted to be there, for one, looked like he wanted to be in a Tigers jersey, but two, he looked comfortable in the game plan that was around him. And that's probably obviously been done on purpose to try to get the most out of somebody who won back-to-back second row of the year awards. So, yeah, I think he definitely impressed me a lot.
Yeah, and it was back to more of that hustling and bustling style. Everything was done with intensity and at speed.
Yeah.
And again, I say that with the caveat of we saw a lot of these guys, of our forwards in particular, so we mentioned the up-tempo nature of the likes of Steph, Clemmer and Paps in that first stint, possibly being because they knew they were only having one stint, and so they didn't have to save anything for the back end of the game. So we'll hopefully see some repetition of that this week, but yeah, I agree. I liked everything he did. He put a beautiful hit on, on the fullback, I think it was, coming across field, which was a nice whack, but he ran with purpose. He looked dangerous. I think he threw an offload or two as well in sort of semi-broken field play. If they can get that ball to him like we've been talking about, and the shape, which even on the weekend, some of those shapes, the way that Caesar and Bud are already linking, I think in and of itself is going to work quite well. I can't remember if I mentioned last week, but I watched a lot of Bud's junior footage, and he's a very ball at the line, late pass type of player. We saw that with the pass to Tape that put him through. I think that Paps is going to really benefit from that.
Yeah.
Because as much as Brooks liked throwing a flat ball late, Brooks rarely took the hit, and Brooks often he had very hard hands.
Yes.
Whereas Jaden will take a hit, and he has very soft hands. Not unlike how again, not comparing the two, but not unlike how Thurston used to play that short play. He'd always commit that defender.
Well, it's the same thing that Moses does, and I think that's why Moses in Ice did so well at the Eels, because Moses does very similar things, and Moses takes the line, and he will take the hit if he has to. Played a full Origin game with a broken scapula, so he I think, like you said, it's definitely complementing each other in terms of Ice and Sullivan's game.
Yeah, and Ice is that type of high impact type of player. If he's playing that up tempo football, that's half the battle. And if we can get that out of him consistently, then we're on a good track. And he looked every bit the Parramatta player he was when we bought him on the weekend. 100%. So again, grain of salt, given that it was a trial. That's just the PSA tonight. But those are things we liked, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking of mixed bag, Asu Kapoa.
Yeah. Didn't wow me. And unfortunately for me, there was a few more negatives than there were positives. Fortunately, I think he was caught out in defence a little bit a couple of times, and that's always been one of his strong suits. I wouldn't say he was directly the result of that try that from the inside pass. I can't even remember who scored it, but just that inside pass. I think
it was a young second rower. I watched it very closely this afternoon.
I had a look at that a couple of times backwards, and I think there's probably a couple of parties that are to blame for that. Steph didn't push hard enough from the inside out to cover that, but that rush wasn't needed either. That was more of a center's rush, and he's not a center anymore. So he had a couple of good hit-ups. Was quite strong in, I guess, his leg drive, but nothing that wowed me, but a few things that disappointed me. So it's unfortunate.
I watched it a few times this afternoon. I think Steph did nothing wrong. I think it was entirely Asu Kapoa just overcommitting, trying to push out and cut that play off early, and by neglecting to notify Steph he's going to push. If he's going to do that and push out lateral, he's got to tell his inside man to cover. His inside man can't mind read. And it was literally a step. So I went frame by frame. This is how fastidious I am sometimes. I went frame by frame, and the structure and formation of the back line is sweet. Asu Kapoa takes one step and lifts his back leg, and in that time, we see that pass under, and we see the second rower go back in. And because Kapoa was pushing lateral, he had his shoulders turned, which meant he wasn't flat and straight, which means he couldn't dive to the left and halt the momentum.
Yeah.
The only thing Steph is guilty of, which is a hard mark because he was trying to clean up Kapoa's mess, was that he got a full tackle on him. So he actually got full tackle wrap, and he didn't make the tackle. Even at that point, old mate probably gets to the line anyway, but that one's entirely on Kapoa. I think he would know it. The thought I had this afternoon watching that and I rewatched the first 30 this afternoon really slowly. I watched bits and pieces several times, actually, which would be no surprise to some of our long-term viewers. And Kapoa, I've come to this conclusion, and this is not anything particularly enlightening that anybody doesn't know, but Asu Kapoa has all the physical attributes of a footballer. I don't know here if he has the mental faculties to be a consistent NRL footballer. I know that many people would say, duh, but I mean it in a very specific way. And that sort of mistake is something that should not be there anymore. And he should have the self-control to realise, I'll go back to that adage of low versus high percentage plays. Pushing out, trying to shut down a defensive, trying to shut down a backline swing in defence is a very selfish play because you've got your structures in place. And by doing that, he tried to be a hero and essentially broke the structure and put it all on his own back and made terrible mistakes. Now, those types of plays are not the type of thing that you want to be doing very regularly unless you can execute. And we saw that was the situation. So I don't, and we've seen in the past, being slightly out of position, slightly misreading certain plays, not being able to play the game effectively in certain situations. When I say play the game, I mean get away with the dark arts, as it were. We saw the situation a couple of years ago with the Cowboys. If he doesn't make contact with Kyle Felt, blah, 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 as much as it was Felt's fault, if he's out of that situation, if he's more aware of his bodily space and whatnot and what's happening in the game, those things don't happen. So when he's got ball in hand and he's playing with that up tempo that we sort of see out of him from time to time, I like it. I think he can play second row. I think he's hard, he's tough, he runs good lines, and he's got good first up contact. But in terms of those small things, the small cognitive things that you need to be able to not only be very prepared for and know how to do that in real time or execute in real time on decision making, but also just, I guess for lack of a better term, common sense on the football field. He's getting to the point where he's got to find it real quick. Otherwise, as much as he's got potential still, he's been around for a few years and he becomes a liability. He was a liability on the weekend and cost us a try. And, everybody at certain points does that. But put it this way, if John Bateman's playing in his position that weekend, they don't score that try.
No.
It was very, very soft. And it was from a simple, it wasn't even a poor read. It wasn't a clever backline play that somebody made a bad read. It was just a terrible over effort that was completely uncalled for, particularly at the time.
Man on man. Everyone was manned up. There was no
They were very marked. 100%. They were very marked. And the structure actually looked really good before Kapoa dove out. It was a miracle Steph got hands on old mate from the Warriors, to be honest, because he was a fair way away. So, I don't know if that sums it up. I'm not about to have him blackballed from my squad, but those things need to disappear. I'll be really excited if they do, but they need to disappear.
Yep. No, I agree.
Seyfarth.
Oh, this kid's going from strength to strength. I'm sorry, but biggest improver for me last year and had an absolute solid game on the weekend.
you're
tackled
on the
hard,
snake.
ran hard. He, like you said, and you've said this copious amounts of times about Seyfarth. You will never ever question his efforts, ever.
No.
He will always question. It's his decisions that you question. I think he is in the perfect. If this is how, like we were wondering how they were going to play him, whether he was going to be the linchpin between the halves or just a second fronty. It's very clear that he's just going to be that second fronty to make the meters. Simplify his game plan, and he is a very good footballer. Don't ask him to do too much. Ask him to just hit hard, run hard, and support well. And what happens? He scores a great try by running a great line.
Yeah. He is, mate. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think he was given a simple message, it looked like, and he executed on that message. If Alex Seyfarth can do that, he can be a decent first-grade footballer. And again, we say this every time we're going to place these judgments on certain players. It's with the giant caveat that we were not first-grade footballers. But with the greatest of respect to Alex, I think that he... How do I put it? He's sort of been able to tap into the amount of potential he can get out of his ability as a footballer very early on, which is great. But I don't think his ceiling is as high as a lot of other people around him. But he's just got there, and he's got there on work ethic and effort on effort, and he's got there on all those effort plays that we've been talking about. And so full credit to him for that. I think that he particularly benefits as well because he strikes me as the sort of bloke that would stick to a game plan to a T, and that's what it looked like. It looked like he was everywhere where he needed to be at all times because it looks like the result and the direction and the game plan matter to someone like Seyfarth. And it looks like it's funny that we come off the back of Kapoa making that, what I called a selfish decision to go out and try to shut the play down solo. Strikes me, Seyfarth, as somebody, maybe in the past, he might have made that mistake. But what we saw on the weekend looks like the type of player that is the antithesis to that. He's very team-oriented. Wherever Caesar told him or Bud told him or Appy told him to be, he was there. And as you said, he benefited with a try.
Yeah, 100%. And again, he's the perfect example of what happens when you listen and you work hard. Because clearly when he first started, we weren't a fan of him. He was... Every time he got the ball, it was like, what is going to go wrong around him? Every time he was tackling, what mistake is he going to make now? But he has worked hard. He's put all the effort in. And everything that he's working towards was on show in that game in terms of how he controlled his game. Yeah. And I was a huge fan of it.
Yep. No, he did really, really well. And he's got the starting lock jersey again this week. It'd be interesting to see if he holds it for round 2, which looks like it might be the case.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't be disappointed if he backs it up. I wouldn't be disappointed in any way, shape, or form.
I don't think he exactly strikes fear into the opposition, but if he can go and do his job and it fits within the new systems that we've got and there's others within the team that can pose threats as opposed to a lock threat, and he just needs to go in and do, as we said, as he's instructed, it can maybe work.
I think he's very similar to Alex Twal, but in the fact that he does run harder than Alex Twal does. And I think that's what's got him a little bit more of that edge over Twally.
Yeah, okay. Mate, we're over the hour mark, and we're going to keep marching on because, we're dedicated.
So we've got to talk about the game ahead.
Podcasters, we do. We'll get there. So on that note, mate, I'll go through the rest of the squad piece by piece, and I might just ask your thoughts in a sentence or so about how you thought they played or what they were missing or what you need to see. Obviously, I'm looking at the old squad list, so not Lockie Galvin, but Iverson Maddai.
Yeah, he was what you would expect from a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Had okay moments, but didn't set the world on fire.
Yeah, he just came out and did his job as best he could. I think you'll find a couple of people in that kind of boat.
He did put that bomb up for lob.
Yep, which was a good kick. Yep. I got him a bit confused with Heath Mason because they were both in the
Yeah, they both had the white headgear on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Folletti.
Didn't see much of him at all, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, didn't see a whole lot. And then he had a bit of a stinger of the shoulder. I think he came off. I think he's okay, though. So.
Actually, that's right. I did see that.
Polle, you mentioned Polle before.
Yeah, a little bit underwhelming for me. Even though the stats probably don't, mirror what I think, because he put up like 107 running meters, and he was only on for half an hour as well. I don't know. He just I come to expect a bit more from Polo, and I just felt it was a little bit more underwhelming than I would have thought.
Yep. All right. Sam Finu.
Has got to get a lot of the silly stuff out of his game. Control his aggression. I think he did a few good things, but those silly penalties and those trying to, that uncontrolled aggression definitely let him down.
Yeah, I agree, but I think he will. I liked what I saw out of Sam.
He's starting 17 this week again, so
yeah. I think we're going to see him round 2 in the squad. To be honest, in the starting 17, making his debut for the Tigers. I like what he saw. I like the fact that he goes after the game big time, which for somebody who he might have even played in the middle a little bit rather than on an edge on the weekend, a 19-year-old prop to go after fully grown men was. I agree with the aggression stuff. He'll get that out of his game as he matures and he gets a couple of raps on the knuckles from the coaching team, which will happen. But I love the fact that he's already got that in place. He's only going to get bigger, fitter, and stronger. And I'm pretty excited about what he can become because he did not look out of place at all for a kid that is 19 years of age.
Yeah.
Possibly turned 20 a couple of weeks ago, but as far as I'm aware, he's about that 19 mark. So, mate, Kit, we didn't see a lot of Kit.
Didn't see a lot of him again. I think he came on for a couple of stints, or maybe came on for a stint for maybe 10 or 20 minutes, maybe 30. But he made a couple of poor decisions or maybe lost the ball a couple of times as well.
He lost the ball once, and he was the one that missed the last tackle on, I think, was it Lussick that dived over or whoever dived over from dummy half?
Yeah.
He was right in front and just didn't get low enough and got bumped off. So, not his finest performance, but it's hard in limited minutes.
But at the same time, I think that my prediction of him starting on the bench is slowly sailing away.
I think what we noticed on the weekend is a lot of these, I'll use quote-unquote kids that are coming through that we've heard a lot about, most definitely have it, most definitely. But it's reminded us, I guess, that, and I know, I'm sure small sample size again, but they still need development. These are 18, 19-year-old kids that are going to be great players, but there's very few people that come through and dominate or play really well before the age of 21, 22. Very few.
Yeah.
So patience, I guess, is the key. And most of us are as guilty as anybody putting the cart before the horse in terms of thinking that these guys might be ready. And maybe that's simply because of the fact that we don't have a whole lot of options in certain areas like lock, for example. And it does concern me, if I'm being perfectly honest, that a lot of these guys are already on top 30 contracts. But, it's something we've got to keep an eye on and something we make sure is tempered, but I'm sure the coaching staff have got that covered. I have heard that Talon and Kit are both playing SG ball this weekend, so they're going back to play a full game down there as opposed to playing another bit part role in the second trial, mate. Sione Fainu, so the oldest of the Fainu brothers, or at least at the Tigers.
Yeah, again, didn't set the world on fire. Read that intercept quite well. I wasn't unimpressed with him, but I wasn't overwhelmed with him.
I was actually pretty impressed. I thought he looked fit. He was aggressive again, but a bit more of that mature approach. He didn't go quite as hard as Sam, but still whacked in defence. He looked very solid in the middle. I thought his runs were incisive. I thought he had decent footwork. I think he had an offload or two. I really like what I saw, and I actually think he's again listed in the squad. He might even be in the 17. I'll have a look at it again in a sec, but he's one that we might well see sneak in, particularly if there's an injury or two early in the season. And based upon what I saw, I would not be disappointed about that. Jake Simpkin. Now, Jake played a bit of 5'8" at one point. I think he played some lock at one point. When Talon came on, he played definitely some hooker when he first relieved Uppy. And for me, it was a case of Jake trying a little bit too hard because he was basically put into that 5'8" role, I think it's at one point, to be a playmaker. I don't think he's a playmaker. I think he's a runner of the football type hooker, and we've mentioned that could play into a lock type role or a small middle role. He's a Nathan Friend for me. If you put Nathan Friend into 5'8", he's going to look average-ish. couple of his kicks were a bit average off the outside of the boot. They weren't really executed, but I don't think that's his role. So I think it would be unfair to judge him on that front. A lot of people give Jake a bit of stick for not being as good as Talon or, being here for a few years. We've said it before, Jake Simpkin is 22. He missed an entire year of football with COVID, and he hasn't had a great deal of football, even though he has been here for, I think this is his third year or so. So Jake Simpkin's a great little footballer, and I'm glad he's in the squad. I don't think he's a world beater, but I think he does quite a good job. I think he's reasonably versatile, and for that reason, I wouldn't be unsurprised to see him in the 14 come round too.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
What about Tal? TDS?
I think he looked better than Simpkin, if I'm being honest. I think he's definitely, like we said, he's beefed up. He's put a bit more meat on his bit more meat on his bones, sorry. I think he made that little break in the middle, which was cool to see. I think, again, I'm glad to see him go back to SG Ball to get game time, full minutes, rather than just a little bit here and there. I think it's become more apparent that he is definitely the heir to Appy.
No doubt. Yeah, definitely. I agree with all that you said. I actually, again, I watched the defence pretty closely, and his line speed and his impetus in defence was up there. He looks like a kid trying to impress. And I hope that's just the way he plays football. And from what I've seen in the juniors, that's the way he plays football. He races up. He makes first contact often. He races laterally from marker to impede the runner all the time. And that's just him in defence. And like you said, the fact he's a bit meatier this year is only going to be good for him. So, yeah, I agree. He's one that he's the type of, he's like a gold bullion that you stick in your safe when you know the world's coming to an end or about to blow up. Yeah, put him in there, keep him safe, let him do what he needs to do in there, and then bring him out when the time's right, and it's gonna be great.
It's an interesting analogy.
You like that?
Yeah. Don't use it again.
Oh, I won't be using it around you, mate. I had to explain the bloody thing. Fair
What's a bully?
Heath Mason, for me, I'll kick off with Heath. I think Heath was everywhere all the time, all effort, trying really hard, and just tried a little bit too hard on certain occasions. But I liked, what did I like? He was everywhere. He's a little jack in the box. He wasn't particularly out of position. He backed up reasonably well, but I think he was just trying to impress, and as young kids do. And I think he's another one who's going to go back to the lower grades and bide his time a little bit. And I think that he looks quite the player, because I know he played fullback and played some decent minutes, which was good at fullback on the weekend, but he can play in the halves, he can play hooker, and he can probably play as a small forward.
Yep, I agree.
Lob, mate, your mate, your man Lobby. So a bit to talk about him, yeah?
Yeah, Happy? I liked him. I thought he was strong in defence. Obviously, he took that high ball and passed it on to set up that third try, I think it was, our third try. But yeah, I think I think Tupou needs to have a solid game this week, because I think he's knocking on the door.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he played well. One thing I just want to see a little bit more out of Lob is learning how to run into contact. He's a big dude, and I think that he could be using his frame a little bit better coming out of yardage. But other than that, yeah, I agree. I think he looks solid. Again, he was another one that had a nice little moment, and so that probably stood out a little bit. But it was good to see that he has the capacity to do that. And if he does push for one of those starting wing spots, he'll definitely be a key target, no doubt.
Yeah.
He's the threat. Tony Sukar?
I thought he was pretty solid, if I'm being honest. I thought he hit hard, ran hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Haven't seen much from him in the past. I haven't really looked hard, to be honest, but I was pleased with what I saw.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, particularly in defence, again, he hit quite hard, which sort of took me back a bit, because he is a young man. I think he's only 19, 20 himself as well. So, yeah, very impressive. And, yeah, he looked strong, ball in hand. He wasn't a world beater again, but, no, he was good. He played well. So, same thing. He's another one that you got to, put him in the safe. Let him simmer for a while. Okay. I got a thought or two on Nav Willett, but young man who played SG Ball last week, played in an NRL trial the week after. What'd you make of Nav?
I think he's got some. I think he's got some work to do. I think he's a bit more raw in terms of his ability. I think he looks like just a natural athlete. Obviously there was AFL chasing him as well as NRL, and he stuck with us. So he is just that natural athlete. But I think there's probably just a little bit more of development, more so I think mentally. I think he looked like he wanted to run hard at the line in his kick returns, but then would stop prior to it and sort of take the hit rather than try to run through the line.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a time thing for me.
Yeah. Oh, that was the point I was going to make. I think he did a really good job. He looked nervous to me in the way he ran the football. He looked like he was afraid of contact because he's a kid, a tall kid, but he's a kid coming up against grown men. Grown men that just came off the interchange bench, well rested from the Warriors system.
Not just grown men, grown Kiwi boys. They're big and they're tough.
Yeah, they're big and tough. So, and that was very noticeable. He was just a bit sheepish in contact, but that will come with time. There was a lot of talk about Tupou, of all people, when he first came and looking a little bit scared of contact about 2 or 3 years ago. And we know how hard Junior Tupou runs now. So,
yeah.
But I agree. He looks very natural under the high ball, which you would expect of someone who's 6'7" and was in the Swans Academy. And he just moves so well. You can see once he gets that confidence in not only taking contact and bracing for contact, but looking to beat players too and fending them off and whatnot. Yeah, I think we might see a good little smooth player in there, a David Peachy clone maybe.
Yeah, yep.
Now, the next two, and this is not like me, apologies, Nick Luatoso and Ruben Porter, I got them mixed up and I didn't know who was who. But I saw two of them come on. I liked one of them. I don't know which one it was. So apologies to the boys. One of them kept offloading. I think it was Luatoso.
Yeah, I think it was Luatoso because if I remember correctly, Ruben Porter came on and within 5 seconds, I think either gave away a penalty or lost the ball. So, Luatoso, I saw a little bit of him, but again, wasn't looking too deep into the guys that came on. They were probably, 25, 26, 27, 28, except for Vaihu. I think, obviously, he came on quite early on. I think he came on.
He came on to replace Casey. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then obviously Vaihu there. I mean, I've spoken a little bit about Vaihu. I thought he was a bit of a goer in the New South Wales Cup, and he's a very enthusiastic type of player. I don't think he played his best game. I think he got a little bit outclassed there. Obviously marking RTS for 60 minutes when you weren't expecting to be thrust into the game so early is a hard job. But that being said, he made a couple of silly mistakes. He should have passed probably in that try that he ended up scoring. It was
he's lucky to score it.
He's lucky. Yeah, he was lucky that the ball didn't get whacked at or he didn't trip and fall and drop it or whatever. So, yeah, look, he was willing and he had a crack. And, I guess, like a lot of those guys who are on the fringes or they're coming through in development, they're going to make mistakes and they're not going to always play the best game. But it's nice to see a piece of what some of them have to offer. Let's jump to this week, mate, because it is getting a little bit long in the tooth. And I know that...
Thank you for those that have stuck with us for an hour and 17 minutes so far.
I know, my friend. They are probably telling us to wrap it up. We play the Dragons at Mudgee this week. We play them on Saturday at 7:05 p.m. That is...
I think that's Australia. I think that's Queensland time.
Queensland time, I'm assuming, so 8 o'clock, but double check your locals. Couple of changes this week, and I think you'll find this is going to be a little bit closer to 17, although there were still a couple of omissions. Jury Buller at fullback, Staines and Tupou are the wingers once again, but we have Justin Olam making his club debut, as it were, in a trial, and Stafford Toa as the starting centres. Bud and Caesar are the halves, as before. Uto Kamanu and Clemmer as the props. Appy is the hooker. The back row and lock stay the same, with Papali'i, AJ Kapoa still standing in for Bateman, who is still recovering from that ankle injury, and Seyfarth to lock the scrum. Now, Lockie Galvin has been cleared at this stage from the minor calf tweak to play 14. So we'll see a bit of game time, which is exciting for us, for those of you who haven't seen him play yet. We then have 12, Poller and Fainu rounding out the bench. Samuela, that is. We have then 18 is Sione Fainu, 19 Simpkin, 20 is Mason, 21 Lob, 22 Willett, 23 Sione Vaihu again, 24 is Solomon Alemalo, who came out of Super 15 rugby, so we'll get to see him have a little bit of run. Tony Sukar at 25 and Matamua at 26 in as well, hopefully to get a little bit of a run themselves. So, mate, who are you excited to see this weekend, or what are you wanting to see this weekend?
I could probably give you one for both. I'm excited to see Olam, to what he'll do in the centres for us. And what I want to see is I want to see Alamalo come on. That's what see him get a couple of minutes and see how he's adapted to rugby league. So,
yep.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I want to see what Alamalo's got. I'd like to see a little bit more of Sione Fainu to see his role. I'm very, very keen to see Galvin. I hope Galvin gets some decent minutes. I think he might come on at the expense of Caesar to save the old bloke's legs. I think Bud might push in, and I think we might see Galvin maybe play the last 30 is maybe my prediction. But the fact that side, bar the likes of a Bateman, who would come into second row, is very likely our starting 13. The bench may be up for grabs, but very likely our starting 13. Yeah. I want to see a bit more football played this time. We saw proof of concept last week. We saw that we could get over the ad line. We saw we could hit in defence. We saw we could kick early and chase in a line as opposed to having shooters. So a very basic game plan. I want to see the game plan expanded a little bit this week. I want to, excuse me, I like what I saw with us working both sides of the ball. And so I'm expecting that to continue. But I think the up-tempo style that we started with, I think we're going to continue to see that play. But, yeah, I just want to see us play a little bit more football, maybe, and, see what we've got in attack.
Yep. No, I definitely I definitely want to see that as well. So,
all right, mate, have you got a bold prediction for this game?
And do we want to do a bold prediction as well as
man of the match
prediction in itself, a match prediction? So we'll do that. So bold prediction is that Olam is actually going to have an absolute blinder. I think he's going to feel he's got a point to prove, and he's going to lead by example. So, and match prediction, I think we're going to wipe the floor with the Dragons. I reckon it's going to 32-6.
Man of the match?
Caesar.
Okay. Very good.
Yep.
I think we're going to see Jareem Buller put on an absolute clinic. I think we're going to see the reins get given to him in backline plays, and I think he's going to have 2 try assists and 1 himself. And I think it's actually going to be tighter than what you think. I think the Dragons will actually play a decently simple brand of football, and I think they'll play it pretty well. I don't know why. That's just a gut feel. And so I think it should be a pretty tight game. I think we'll get home maybe in a tight one, 22-16 or 22-18. And man of the match for me is going to be Buller off the back of that prediction.
Yep.
There you go.
That's fair. Wouldn't say no to that either.
Anything you want to mention about either last week's game or the upcoming trial, my friend?
No, mate, we've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes. I think we're exhausted everything that we can think of.
Oh, look, you and I, mate, this could be a 10-hour podcast every week if we
but we don't need
we were allowed to write in full sentences and not dot points, but alas, here we are. That's it. Okay, mate. A special thanks to our sponsor once again, bestongrounddigital.com. The digital marketing agency looks after the little guy. If you want anything related to digital marketing, Best on Ground Digital at bestongrounddigital.com. Very, 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 very big thanks to those boys for being on board this year to help support the show.
Thanks to them too for fixing our Apple podcast.
Good work. Well done. So, people might be listening to what I was going to say at the back end of it, but you've now ruined my thunder, so thank you for that.
What I do.
You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and now you can find us on Apple Podcasts. So thank you to everybody who's been messaging and sending
Instagram.
through comments and whatnot on Instagram, Facebook, Facebook comments, that sort of stuff about saying, why aren't you blokes on Apple? I can't find you. We're now on Apple. So thank you for your patience. It was a bit of a workaround. We did have to call in the experts to get us over the line, but we're there. We're up and rolling. So if you followed our links via Facebook to find us, you will notice that we have an Apple link with there as well. That takes you to Apple Podcasts. So for all those people that use iPhones, couldn't imagine. Anyway, for all those lovely people who are using iPhones, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. So we're very pleased to be in that position. Whilst you're there, I recommend that you look at 2 other podcasts that do things as well as us, if not slightly better sometimes. We have, of course, the wonderful people over at West Tigers podcast. They are also in cahoots with the Ambush Facebook page, do fantastic things down in the local area, down around Tiger Town, and they also organise events and things like that as well around game day. The Ambush and West Tigers podcast. The other podcast that we're going to recommend you go and have a little listen to is West Life podcast. Those 3 gents over there as well do wonderful stuff. You cannot get enough Tigers media. And while you're over at those channels, tell them to throw a bit of love back, boys. What are you doing? Hey,
I know, right?
West, over here on Struggle Street. Tell them, hey, boys, great show. Tiger Town sent me here. That'd be great. Anyway, it's all in jest. We do this because we love it, mate.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if you needed an answer. I thought that was just a rhetorical question. Of course we
Yeah,
do.
it was more of a statement than anything, really.
Yeah.
We must be going for an hour and 25 minutes, dead set, because I'm running out of puff.
There you go. I'm out of breath.
I guess then, my friend, there's nothing more to do on this episode than say, go the mighty West Tigers against St George in Mudgee on Saturday. You beauty.
I'll just finish it with go the Tigers.